You were never my father. The words sliced through the air between us, each syllable dripping with contempt I never knew she possessed. Sarah stood there, chest heaving, eyes blazing with a hatred so pure it almost took my breath away. I felt something inside me go utterly still. Not broken, but emptied of all the warmth I'd carried for her. All those years of sacrifice, of putting her needs before my own, of being the reliable constant in her chaotic world. And this was her truth, that none of it mattered, that I had never mattered. The betrayal wasn't just in the words themselves, but in how easily she wielded them, like a blade she'd been sharpening in secret. I didn't flinch, didn't argue. I simply absorbed the poison she'd chosen to feed me. And in that moment of perfect silence, I understood. It was time to finally sort everything out once and for all. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And then Emma threw herself on the floor screaming because I wouldn't buy her that stupid toy. Right there in the middle of Target, everyone staring at me like I'm some kind of monster. Jessica's voice carried that familiar edge of exhaustion as I set the steaming mug of ginger tea in front of her. The ceramic clinked softly against my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped her with homework 20 years ago. She wrapped her fingers around the warmth, but her eyes remained cold, distant. I just don't know what I'm doing wrong with them anymore, Dad. Jake's been acting out at school, and Emma... She trailed off, taking a sip that seemed more like a pause to gather ammunition than actual appreciation. And David? I asked gently, settling into the chair across from her. How's he handling everything? Her laugh was bitter. David's been working overtime, but it's still not enough. The mortgage went up again, and the car payment, groceries, everything just keeps climbing. She looked at me then, that look I'd seen so many times before, not quite asking, but heavily suggesting. I don't know how we're supposed to keep up with it all. I felt that familiar tug in my chest, the same one that had opened my wallet countless times before. But something about her tone today, the practiced nature of her complaints, made me pause. Jessica, have you and David sat down to look at your budget? Maybe there are some areas where... Budget. Her voice sharpened. Dad, you don't understand. We're not talking about cutting back on lattes here. These are real expenses. I know they are, sweetheart, but maybe if you tracked where the money's going, you might find... Find what? That we're bad with money? That we're irresponsible? The mug hit the table harder than necessary, tea sloshing dangerously close to the rim. You think I haven't tried everything already? I raised my hand slightly, a gesture of peace. That's not what I meant. I just thought. And the kids, she continued, her voice climbing, maybe if you understood what it's really like being a parent today instead of judging from the sidelines, you'd realize that children are different now. You can't just discipline them the way you used to. Times have changed. Something cold settled in my stomach. The way she said "the way you used to" carried an accusation I couldn't quite grasp. Jessica, I'm not judging you. I'm trying to help. Maybe if you established some consistent boundaries with the kids, stuck to consequences when they misbehave. Consequences? She stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. You think I don't know about consequences? You think I'm just letting them run wild because I'm too stupid to figure out parenting? That's not what I said. You sit here in your perfect little house with your perfect little retirement, and you judge how I handle my life, my children, my marriage. Her face was flushed now, eyes blazing with a fury that seemed to come from somewhere much deeper than our conversation. You have no idea what it's like to struggle, to really struggle, and instead of helping, you lecture me about budgets and discipline like I'm still 12 years old. I felt the ground shifting beneath us, the careful foundation of our relationship cracking with each word. Sarah, I do want to help. I always have. But maybe what? Maybe I should be more grateful? Maybe I should just smile and pretend everything's fine while my world falls apart? She was shaking now, and I could see years of resentment pouring out, resentment I never knew existed. You want to know the truth, Dad? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could feel my heart beating against my ribs, some primal part of me recognizing the danger in her eyes. She looked at me as if I were a stranger, as if everything we'd shared meant nothing. You were never my father. The words exploded from her lips like venom she'd been storing for years. What could you possibly know about raising children? I blinked, feeling as though I'd been slapped. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. Jessica, I think you need to calm down and... Don't tell me to calm down. Her voice cracked with hysteria. And don't you dare patronize me. You sit there acting like some wise patriarch. But the truth is, you don't know anything about being a real father because you're not one. Something in her tone made my blood freeze. This wasn't just anger anymore. There was something else, something calculated behind her eyes. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the DNA test I took last year. The words fell between us like stones into still water. You want to know why I never felt that connection everyone talks about? Why I never really felt like your daughter? Her laugh was sharp, brittle. Because I'm not. The world tilted. 28 years of memories, first steps, scraped knees, bedtime stories, graduation tears, suddenly felt like photographs of someone else's life. That's not possible. Oh, it's possible. It's fact. She pulled out her phone with trembling hands, scrolling frantically. I have the results right here. 0% probability. 0. You are not my biological father. I stared at her, this stranger wearing my daughter's face, and felt something fundamental inside me die. Not break. Die. The hurt was so profound it went beyond pain into a strange, hollow numbness. My mind raced back to those last terrible months with Rebecca, the fights, the accusations, her guilt that I'd attributed to our failing marriage. So there, Jessica continued, her voice gaining strength from my silence. Now you know why your precious advice means nothing to me. You're just some man who happened to be married to my mother. You're nobody. I sat there for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, watching her face flush with vindictive satisfaction. She was enjoying this. The revelation that had shattered my world was her moment of triumph. When I finally spoke, my voice was eerily calm. Well then. I stood up slowly, methodically pushing my chair back under the table. Jessica's expression shifted slightly. She'd expected tears, anger, begging, not this quiet acceptance. If I'm not your father, I said, walking to the mantelpiece where her high school graduation photo sat beside family portraits spanning decades, then I suppose I don't have any fatherly obligations. I picked up the graduation photo first, studying her 18-year-old face, smiling back at me with the same eyes that now watched me with growing unease. Into the drawer it went. Then the family Christmas photos, one by one, methodically, quietly. Dad, what are you doing? I'm not your dad, remember? I didn't look at her as I continued collecting pictures, trophies from her soccer days that I'd attended every weekend, the drawing she'd made me in second grade that said world's best daddy in crayon. You made that very clear. I didn't mean, oh, but you did. I turned to face her then, and she actually took a step back. You took a DNA test. You've known this for a year. A whole year, Jessica. And you chose this moment, this way, to deliver the news. So no, you meant exactly what you said. Her phone buzzed in her hand, but she ignored it. Dad, I was angry. Stop calling me that. The words came out sharper than I intended. You've made it clear that title doesn't belong to me, so let's be accurate going forward. I walked to my desk, pulled out a notebook, and began writing. Let me see. Mortgage assistance, car payments, emergency funds, Christmas gifts for the kids, birthday money, groceries when David was laid off last spring. I looked up at her pale face. This is quite a list of things someone who isn't a father wouldn't be expected to provide. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my life. I tore the page out and folded it neatly. You want to know what it's like to live without a father? You're about to find out. My phone was in my hand before I'd even consciously decided to make the call. David picked up on the second ring. Hey, David, it's me. I watched Jessica's face drain of all color. I'm calling to let you know that as of today, I won't be providing any more financial assistance to your family. What? Why? Did something happen? I'd ask your wife to explain, but since she's made it clear that family relationships aren't what I thought they were, I don't see any reason to continue with arrangements based on obligations that apparently never existed. I don't understand. Congratulations, son. You're now the sole provider for your family. I'm sure Jessica will fill you in on the details. I hung up before he could respond. Jessica was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. You can't do this. The kids have parents. Two parents, as you've just reminded me. I'm not one of them. I walked to the front door and opened it. I think it's time for you to go home to your family. This is insane. You raised me. That has to count for something. According to you, it counts for nothing. I held the door wider. You wanted the truth to come out, Jessica. Well, here's another truth. Actions have consequences, and you're about to learn what it means to live with yours. She stood there for a long moment, tears finally starting to fall, but I felt nothing. The love I'd carried for her, the protective instinct, the automatic forgiveness, all of it had been surgically removed by her revelation and the cruelty with which she delivered it. Please, she whispered, go home, Jessica. Go home to your real family and figure out how to solve your problems without someone who was never really your father. She left without another word, and I closed the door behind her. The house fell into a silence I'd never experienced before. Not empty, but finally honest. The first night was the worst. I sat in my living room, surrounded by the empty spaces where Jessica's pictures had been, and tried to understand how I'd become the villain in this story. 28 years of love, sacrifice, and devotion, reduced to nothing by a DNA test and a moment of calculated cruelty. I kept replaying the look in her eyes when she delivered that final blow. Not the pain of discovery, but satisfaction. She'd enjoyed watching me crumble. That's what cut deepest, not the biological truth, but the realization that someone I'd loved unconditionally had taken pleasure in destroying me. How long had she known? How many times had she sat at my table, accepted my money, let me play grandfather to her children, all while harboring this secret weapon? The betrayal felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. The doorbell rang at 8:30 the next morning. Through the peephole, I could see David shifting nervously from foot to foot, his usually neat appearance disheveled. Dark circles under his eyes told me he'd had as rough a night as I had. Ralph, he said when I opened the door, we need to talk. I let him in, noting how his eyes immediately went to the empty mantelpiece. He looked genuinely stricken, which was something at least. Unlike his wife, David had never been one for manipulation. She told you everything? I asked, settling into my chair. Yeah. He rubbed his face with both hands. Ralph, I swear I didn't know about any of this. The DNA test, the real father situation. She never told me. But you believe her? He slumped forward. She showed me the results. I'm sorry, Ralph. I'm so sorry. Something about his genuine remorse was almost harder to bear than Jessica's cruelty. So what brings you here, David? Come to help me pack up the rest of her childhood memories? The kids, Ralph. Emma and Jake, they keep asking why Grandpa hasn't come by in so long. They're wondering when you're coming to visit. I met his eyes steadily. Tell them I won't be. Explain it however you see fit. David's face paled. Ralph, come on, they love you, and you love them. That has to count for something, biology aside. There it was, the guilt card, played with surgical precision. You explain it however you see fit. They're not my responsibility anymore, remember? But they love you, and you love them. That has to count for something, biology aside. I stared at him, this decent man who'd stumbled into the crossfire of a deception that predated his marriage. David, let me ask you something. If you discovered tomorrow that Emma and Jake weren't your biological children, that Jessica had lied to you for years, would you still feel obligated to provide for them financially? His face went pale. That's different. Is it? Is it really? I leaned forward. Because from where I'm sitting, I was the one who was deceived. I was the one who built my entire identity around being a father to someone else's child, while the actual father got to live his life free of responsibility. The children didn't choose this. Neither did I. My voice came out harder than I intended. But Jessica did choose. She chose when to take that test. She chose when to reveal it, and she chose to do it in the cruelest way possible. Those were her choices, David. Now she gets to live with the consequences. He sat there for several minutes, opening his mouth to speak and then closing it again. Finally, what if there was some way to make this right? What if she apologized properly? What would that apology look like, do you think? Would it undo 28 years of deception? Would it erase the fact that she took pleasure in destroying me yesterday? David had no answer for that. He left shortly after, and I was alone with my thoughts again until the phone rang that afternoon. Ralph. Rebecca's voice was ice-cold steel. What the hell do you think you're doing? Hello, Rebecca. I'm doing well, thanks for asking. Don't you dare get sarcastic with me. Jessica is devastated. David is struggling to understand what happened, and my grandchildren don't understand why their grandfather has suddenly abandoned them. Your grandchildren? I let the words hang in the air. That's interesting terminology. You know what I mean. You raised her, Ralph. You don't get to just walk away when things get complicated. Complicated? The laugh that escaped me was bitter. Rebecca, she looked me in the eye and told me I was never her father. She enjoyed it, so I'm simply agreeing with her assessment. She was angry. People say things they don't mean when they're, oh, but she did mean it. She had the DNA results to back it up. Results from a test she took a year ago, Rebecca. A full year of knowing the truth and saying nothing. That's not anger. That's premeditation. Silence stretched between us, filled with decades of unspoken truths. You always were vindictive, she said finally, and you were always a liar. The words came out quietly, but they hit like a hammer. 28 years, Rebecca. 28 years you let me believe Jessica was mine. Do you have any idea what that means? Do you understand what you stole from me? I was protecting. You were protecting yourself. You were covering up your affair, and you let me pay the price. Emotionally, financially, every way that mattered. And now you have the audacity to call me vindictive for refusing to continue subsidizing your deception? Those children need their real grandfather, Jessica's biological father. Have you told him he has grandchildren, Rebecca? Does he know about his daughter's financial troubles? Or are you planning to keep that secret too? Her sharp intake of breath told me I'd hit the mark. He doesn't know, does he? I continued. All these years and you never told him. So not only did you rob me of the truth, you robbed him of the chance to be a father. And you robbed Jessica of the chance to know her real dad. Tell me again how I'm the one who's wrong here. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You created this mess, Rebecca, you and Jessica, and now you want me to clean it up by pretending nothing happened, by continuing to play a role in a lie that's already cost me everything. Well, I'm done. Find another sucker. I hung up before she could respond, but I knew this was far from over. The pressure would intensify now. They'd try guilt, manipulation, maybe even bring the children into it directly. But I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Clarity. For the first time since yesterday's revelation, I knew exactly where I stood. I was no one's father, no one's provider, no one's safety net, and surprisingly, that felt like freedom. The purge began 3 days later. I started with her bedroom, the one that had remained untouched since she'd moved out 6 years ago, preserved like a shrine to a daughter who never existed. Every trophy, every school report, every handmade Mother's Day card she'd given me over the years went into black garbage bags with methodical precision. I worked in stages. First the bedroom, then the closets, then the basement storage boxes labeled Jessica's things in my own careful handwriting. 28 years of accumulated memories, sorted and bagged like any other household waste. Mrs. Patterson from next door was the first to notice. I was hauling the third bag to the curb when she appeared at her fence, coffee mug in hand, eyeing the growing pile with barely concealed curiosity. "Moving, Ralph?" she asked, her tone carefully casual. "Just getting rid of some clutter," I replied, hefting another bag onto the pile. Amazing how much junk accumulates over the years. She peered closer at the bags, and I could see her trying to process what she was seeing. Photo frames, books, what looked like a graduation cap sticking out of one torn corner. That's quite a lot of clutter. 28 years worth, I said evenly, turning back toward the house. By the time I brought out the next load, she'd been joined by Bob from across the street. They watched me work with the fascination of people witnessing a car accident, horrified but unable to look away. "Those look like family photos," Bob ventured when I emerged with a box of framed pictures. "They do, don't they?" I agreed, dumping the box unceremoniously onto the pile. A wedding photo of Jessica and David tumbled out, their smiling faces now destined for the landfill. Word traveled fast in our neighborhood. By evening, my trash pile had become something of a local attraction. I could see curtains twitching, Small groups of neighbors gathered at a respectful distance, phones probably buzzing with speculation and gossip. I was loading the last of Jessica's childhood furniture, a small, white desk I'd painted myself when she was 7, when my phone rang. "Are you out of your mind?" Jessica's voice cracked through the speaker. "Mrs. Chen just called me. She said you're throwing away my things, my childhood things. I'm disposing of clutter," I said, wedging the desk into my truck bed, items that no longer serve any purpose in my life. "Those are my memories, my photos. You can't just... Actually, I can. They're in my house, therefore they're my property, and I've decided I no longer want them." The silence stretched long enough that I thought she might have hung up. Then, "Please, whatever else you think of me, those things, they're all I have left of being your daughter." "But you were never my daughter, remember? You made that very clear. So these aren't memories of a father-daughter relationship. They're just souvenirs of a lie." She was crying now, but I felt nothing. "I know you're hurt, but this is crazy. People are talking, Ralph. The whole neighborhood thinks you've lost your mind. Let them talk." And talk they did. The stories spread through our small community like wildfire, but the reactions were far from uniform. At the grocery store, I encountered Sarah Morrison, who'd known Jessica since she was small. "Ralph, honey, I heard what happened." Her voice was thick with sympathy. "That poor girl must be so confused right now. Finding out something like that, it's traumatic for everyone involved." "Is it?" I asked, loading my cart with deliberate movements. "Of course it is. She's probably lashing out because she doesn't know how to process it. But to lose her father on top of learning the truth..." Sarah shook her head sadly. "Maybe if you gave her some time, some space to work through her feelings." I nodded non-committally and pushed my cart toward the checkout, where I encountered a very different perspective from Tom Bradley, Jessica's old high school principal. "Ralph," he said quietly, "I heard about the DNA situation. That's a hell of a thing to drop on someone after nearly 30 years. It is. And the way she told you..." He shook his head. "I remember Jessica as a student, bright girl, but there was always something calculated about her. Even as a teenager, she knew exactly how to push buttons to get what she wanted." I looked at him more closely. This was the first person who hadn't immediately cast Jessica as the victim. "She's been telling people it was as much a shock to her as it was to you," Tom continued. "Says you're overreacting, being vindictive. But a DNA test doesn't happen by accident, does it? Someone has to make that choice, pay for it, wait for results." "No," I said quietly. "It doesn't happen by accident." And choosing to reveal it the way she did in the middle of an argument when you were trying to help her. Tom's expression was thoughtful. "That takes a special kind of cruelty." The battle lines were drawn. Team Jessica painted her as a confused victim. Shocked by her own discovery, devastated by her father's harsh rejection, they spoke of forgiveness, of unconditional love, of how DNA shouldn't matter when it came to family bonds. Team Ralph, smaller but more vocal, focused on the cruelty of her revelation, the calculated timing, the year of deception that had preceded it. They understood that some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness, that love, even parental love, had limits. But perhaps the most telling moment came when I encountered Marge Fletcher, Jessica's old boss from her first job out of college. I'd always liked Marge. She was direct, no nonsense, the type who called things as she saw them. "Ralph," she said, cornering me at the bank, "I've been hearing the stories, both sides of them." I waited, curious where this would go. "Jessica came to see me last week, wanted to borrow money, said you'd cut her off over some family misunderstanding. She made it sound like you'd had a spat over finances, maybe been a little too controlling." "Did she?" But then I heard the real story from Tom Bradley. Marge's eyes were sharp. "DNA test, year of lies, deliberate cruelty. That's not a family misunderstanding, Ralph. That's betrayal." She paused, studying my face. "You know what I told her when she asked for the loan?" I shook my head. I told her that actions have consequences, and that maybe for the first time in her life, she was going to have to live with hers. As I walked home that evening, past neighbors who either waved sympathetically or averted their eyes uncomfortably, I realized something important. I didn't care which side they chose. Their opinions, their judgments, their gossip, none of it mattered. What mattered was that I was finally free from the weight of a lie I'd carried unknowingly for 28 years. And every bag I'd put on that curb, every photo I'd discarded, every memory I'd released, each one had made me lighter. The truth, as it turned out, was the ultimate liberation. 2 weeks after our last conversation, David showed up at my door again. But this time was different. Gone was the desperate advocate trying to salvage family peace. The man standing on my porch looked exhausted, conflicted, and something else, angry. "We need to talk," he said, and I could hear the weight in his voice. Not about Jessica asking me to come here, not about the kids, about what I'm seeing. I let him in, noting how he avoided the living room where we'd had our previous conversations, instead gravitating toward the kitchen table. He sat heavily, running his hands through his hair in a gesture I'd come to recognize as his way of processing overwhelming stress. "Ralph, I owe you an apology," he began, "not just for what Jessica did, but for not seeing it sooner." I waited, sensing this wasn't the time to interrupt. After our last talk, I started paying attention. Really paying attention. His voice was thick with something between disappointment and disgust. "Did you know she's been telling different stories to different people?" I suspected as much. "To the Hendersons, she said the DNA test was something she did on a whim, just for fun, and was as shocked as anyone. To Sarah Morrison, she claimed her mother suggested it to help with some family medical history research. To Tom Bradley," he shook his head. "To Tom, she said you'd been questioning her paternity for years, making her feel insecure about her place in the family." I felt a familiar cold anger settling in my chest. Even now, even after everything, she was still manipulating the narrative. "But the worst part," David continued, "was when I started asking her directly. Simple questions, Ralph. When exactly did you take the test? Why didn't you tell me? Why did you choose that moment to tell him?" And her answers kept changing. First it was last spring, then it was 6 months ago, then suddenly it was around Christmas. The reasons shifted too. Curiosity, then medical concerns, then some story about ancestry research. David's hands clenched into fists. "Ralph, I've been married to this woman for 8 years. I know when she's lying." I poured him a cup of coffee, noting the tremor in his hands as he accepted it. "What else?" "The money." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Jesus Christ, Ralph, the money. I knew you helped us out sometimes, but I never understood the scope of it until it stopped." He pulled out his phone, scrolled through what looked like banking apps, his face growing paler by the second. "The mortgage payment you were covering? I thought it was maybe a couple $100 a month, helping with the increase from the rate adjustment. It was $1,500 every month for 3 years." I said nothing, letting him continue. "The car payments, the insurance, the kids' daycare, emergency funds I thought were from our savings." His laugh was bitter. "We don't have savings, Ralph. We've never had savings. Everything, every bit of financial security we thought we had, came from you. And now? Now." He looked up at me with hollow eyes. "We're 3 weeks away from losing the house. The car's going to be repossessed next Tuesday. I had to pull Emma out of her dance classes and Jake from soccer. And Jessica is acting like this is all some temporary inconvenience that you'll come around on once you get over being dramatic." I felt a moment of something, not quite satisfaction, but a grim vindication. She said those words, "get over being dramatic," among others. She seems to think that because you raised her, because you love her, you'll eventually cave, that this is all just posturing. And what do you think? David was quiet for a long time, staring into his coffee cup as if it held answers to questions he was afraid to ask. "I think," he said finally, "that she knew exactly what she was doing when she took that test. I think she knew exactly how much it would hurt you when she told you. And I think she expected you to absorb it, forgive her, and keep playing the role of the father she just told you weren't." That's a harsh assessment of your wife. It's an honest assessment. His voice hardened. "You want to know what convinced me? Last night, when the kids were asking again about Grandpa Ralph, she told them you were going through a phase and that you'd get over it soon. She looked our children in the eye and told them their grandfather was having a tantrum." The weight of that settled between us. Jessica wasn't just manipulating the community narrative. She was poisoning her own children's understanding of the situation. David, I said carefully, I need you to understand something. This isn't a phase. This isn't a tantrum. This isn't something I'm going to get over. She made a choice, multiple choices, and I've made mine. I know. His voice was barely above a whisper. I know, and honestly, I don't blame you. If someone I'd loved and sacrificed for treated me the way she treated you, he shook his head. I understand why you did what you did. But the kids, Ralph, Emma and Jake, they don't understand any of this. They just know their grandfather disappeared from their lives, and their mom keeps promising he's coming back. He looked up at me with desperate eyes. What am I supposed to tell them? The truth. Age appropriately, but the truth. Jessica will never allow that. She's already threatened to take them and leave if I turn them against her by explaining what really happened. I studied David's face, the exhaustion, the fear, the growing realization that he'd married someone capable of breathtaking selfishness. What do you want from me, David? Because if you're here hoping I'll change my mind. No, he said quickly. No, I'm not. I'm here because I needed to tell someone who would understand. Because I'm starting to see sides of my wife I never knew existed, and it's terrifying. Because I'm realizing that everything I thought I knew about our life was built on lies and manipulation. He stood up, pacing to the window. The other day, I found out she'd borrowed $3,000 from her coworker, Janet, told her it was for Emma's medical bills. Emma's fine, Ralph, perfectly healthy, but Jessica needed money for something. I still don't know what. And she chose to lie rather than admit we were struggling because her relationship with you had imploded. So she's escalating the deception. She's doubling down on everything. The lies to neighbors, the lies to friends, now lies to get money. David turned back to me. I'm starting to wonder what else she's lied about. How many other stories don't add up? How many other manipulations I've been too trusting to see? He sat back down, looking directly at me. Ralph, I want you to know, I'm on your side in this. What she did to you was unforgivable. The way she did it was cruel. And watching her scramble to control the narrative now, seeing how easily she lies to everyone, including our children, I understand why you can't forgive this. But you're asking me to anyway. No. His voice was firm. I'm asking for advice, because I'm drowning here, and I don't know how to protect my kids from the mess their mother created. I can't fix our finances. Not without help I have no right to ask for. I can't fix their relationship with you. That's entirely Jessica's fault. And I'm starting to realize I can't fix my wife because she doesn't think she's broken. I looked at this good man, trapped in the wreckage of Jessica's choices, and felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Genuine sympathy. Not for Jessica, never again for Jessica, but for David, and for those children who were paying the price for their mother's cruelty. David, I said quietly, you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. And you can't build a stable life on someone else's foundation of lies. He nodded slowly, tears beginning to gather in his eyes. I know. God help me. I know. The phone call I made that Tuesday evening was brief and to the point. Jessica, we need to have one final conversation, you, me, and David. This Saturday, my house, 2:00. Dad, this is my last gesture of good faith. If you want any possibility of resolving this situation, you'll be here. But I have one condition. The lies stop. No more stories to the neighbors. No more versions of events designed to make you look like the victim. The truth or nothing. Silence stretched across the line before she spoke, her voice smaller than usual. Okay. Saturday arrived gray and cold, matching the atmosphere in my living room as the three of us took our positions. Jessica and David on the couch, me in my chair. It felt like a tribunal, which perhaps it was. Before we begin, I said, my voice calm and measured, let me be clear about why we're here. David has shared some concerning observations about the stories you've been telling, Jessica. I want to give you one opportunity to set the record straight. Jessica's jaw tightened. I haven't been lying to anyone. Really? I pulled out a small notebook, the same one I'd used to calculate her financial dependencies weeks ago, now filled with additional notes. Let's review, shall we? To the Hendersons, you claimed the DNA test was done on a whim and the results shocked you. To Sarah Morrison, you said your mother suggested it for medical history. To Tom Bradley, you implied I'd been questioning your paternity for years. Her face flushed, But she remained defiant. People hear what they want to hear. I never said, and then there's the timeline. I flipped a page. The test was done last spring. No, wait, 6 months ago. Actually, around Christmas. Which is it, Jessica? I don't have to sit here and... Yes, you do. David's voice cut through her protest like ice. She turned to him, shocked by the hardness in his tone. You wanted this meeting, remember? You said you could fix this if Ralph would just listen to reason, so answer his questions. Jessica stared at her husband as if seeing a stranger. David, you're supposed to be on my side. I was on your side. I defended you to Ralph, to the neighbors, to myself, but then I started paying attention. David leaned forward, his voice gaining strength. The borrowed money from Janet that was supposedly for Emma's medical bills, when Emma's perfectly healthy. The story about Ralph being controlling and demanding when I've seen the bank records of everything he's given us over the years. The promises to the kids that Grandpa is just going through a phase. I was trying to protect them. From what? From understanding that their mother destroyed the most stable relationship in their lives out of spite? Spite? Jessica's voice climbed to a shriek. I told him the truth. Finally, after years of living a lie, I told him the truth. You told me the truth in the cruelest way possible, I said quietly, after a year of knowing it, in the middle of an argument, designed to cause maximum pain. That wasn't about truth, Jessica. That was about power. Power? She laughed bitterly. What power? Look at my life, Ralph. Look at what your abandonment has done to my family. My abandonment? I felt the old anger stirring, but kept my voice level. I spent 28 years loving you, supporting you, being the father I thought you needed. You spent 1 year knowing I wasn't your biological parent and chose to weaponize that information against me. Who abandoned whom? Jessica stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. David working all those hours, the kids acting out, money problems, and then finding out that everything I thought I knew about my identity was a lie. So you decided to make it my problem too. You were supposed to love me anyway. The words exploded out of her. You were supposed to be the kind of father who loved me no matter what. But the minute you found out we weren't blood, you dropped me like I was nothing. I dropped you, I said slowly, because you made it clear that 28 years of love and sacrifice meant nothing to you, because you took pleasure in hurting me, because you stood in my kitchen and told me I was nobody. I was angry. You were cruel. There's a difference. I closed the notebook and set it aside. But more than that, you were calculating. This wasn't some heat-of-the-moment revelation, Jessica. You've known for a year. You planned this. That's not. When exactly did you take the test? David interrupted, his voice sharp. And don't give me another shifting timeline. When exactly? Jessica turned to face him, and for the first time I saw real fear in her eyes. Why does it matter when? Because I've been thinking about timing, David continued relentlessly. About when our financial problems really started getting bad. About when you started coming to Ralph for help more frequently. About when you started those conversations about how hard it was to feel connected to family. David, you're being paranoid. Am I? Because it seems awfully convenient that you discovered this information right around the time we desperately needed Ralph's continued support, then held on to it like a nuclear option until the moment he suggested you take some responsibility for your life. The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica's face cycled through emotions: anger, fear, calculation, and finally, something like resignation. You want to know the truth? She said finally, her voice dropping to something cold and hard. Fine. I took the test 13 months ago. I've known for over a year that Ralph isn't my biological father. David went pale. Jesus Christ, Jessica. And yes, I waited to tell him. Because I knew it would hurt him. Because I knew he'd react exactly like this. And because... She paused, seeming to struggle with the words. Because, I prompted. Because I wanted to punish him. The admission came out in a rush. All my life, I've watched him be this perfect, responsible, moral person, always doing the right thing, always disappointed when I didn't live up to his standards. And finally, I had something that would make him as miserable as he'd made me feel all these years. The honesty was breathtaking in its ugliness. David looked like he might be sick. So there's your truth, Jessica continued, turning back to me with something like defiance. I wanted to hurt you. Mission accomplished. Are you happy now? I looked at this woman, this stranger, and felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. No, Jessica, I'm not happy. I'm sad. Sad that someone I loved so much could harbor that kind of resentment. Sad that you chose cruelty over honesty. Sad that you're willing to destroy your children's stability to satisfy your need for revenge. Don't lecture me about my children. Your children are about to lose their home, I said quietly. Their financial security is gone, their family is fracturing, and instead of taking responsibility for the choices that led to this point, you're still trying to manipulate the situation by playing victim. I stood up, walking to the window where she'd been standing. Here's what's going to happen, Jessica. Nothing. I'm going to do nothing to help you, nothing to hurt you, nothing to interfere with the consequences of your choices. You wanted to live without me as your father? Congratulations. You're getting exactly what you asked for. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. You made your choice when you took that test. You made it again when you held the results for a year. You made it a third time when you chose to reveal them in the cruelest way possible, and you're making it again now by refusing to take responsibility for any of it. David stood up slowly, his face a mask of controlled fury. Jessica, we're leaving. Now. David, please. No. His voice was flat, final. I've heard enough, more than enough. He paused at the door, now turning back to look at his wife. You know what? If there's this much lying and deception around DNA and paternity, maybe I should get a test done too, just to make sure Emma and Jake are actually mine. Jessica's face went white. David, you can't be serious. I'm dead serious, because if you could lie to Ralph for a year about something this fundamental, if you could lie to me about when you found out, if you can lie to our neighbors and friends and children, and he shook his head. How do I know what else you've been lying about? Those are your children. You would never what? Lie? Manipulate? Hurt someone who loved you? David's laugh was bitter, because you just admitted to doing exactly that. Jessica looked between us, panic replacing her earlier defiance. This is insane. You're both being insane. David, I'm your wife. Those children are yours. You can't seriously think. I don't know what to think anymore, David said quietly. About anything. About you. About our marriage. About what's real and what's another one of your manipulations. He walked to the door, then turned back one final time. Ralph, thank you for everything you did for Jessica and for helping me see who I actually married. Jessica stood frozen in my living room as David's footsteps faded down the front walk. When his car started in the driveway, she finally moved, running to the window to watch him leave. This is all your fault, she whispered, but there was no conviction left in her voice. No, Jessica, I said quietly. This is all yours. She left without another word, and I watched from the window as she walked down the street toward her uncertain future. Finally, truly, on her own. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. And when you're ready for the next story, just click the box on the left. Thanks for watching.